Hello all, I welcome you all to the 17th lecture, this course EE 690 ATM. So in the last lecture we saw about the Boltzmann transport equation, we derived the equation, and then we saw an example of scattering with an impurity, right? So we will just do a very short recap, and then we will see one last aspect of scattering, that will be phonons. So that will be the topic of today's discussion. It will be introduction of phonons in scattering as a scatterer in Boltzmann transport equation. The Boltzmann transport deals with temporal changes in the Fermi function. So it is like you take a material, take some point at R, and the probability of that position R to be filled with an electron with momentum P is given by F R P at any given point T. And all we talk about is the changes in this Fermi distribution, right? That's what tells you how the charges are moving. And the partial change of this with respect to time plus some change with respect to time due to diffusion, we saw this previously, plus changes of this function with respect to drift due to external forces will be compensated by changes in this position or this function due to scattering, right? This is what we saw previously. In the event that there is no diffusion or drift, that is the entire material is homogeneous and there is no external force, the change in the distribution should be equivalent to the scattering, right? And this we wrote as F at any point minus F naught, that the equilibrium Fermi-Dirac distribution, by a phenomenological parameter called tau. Tau is the mean lifetime, and this is called as relaxation time approximation. One example of this is what we solved in the homework. For instance, let's say if we have a homogeneous medium with just drift, we write as dou F by dou T, and the force due to drift or the change in the Fermi-Dirac distribution due to drift is written as minus E by H cross some electric field plus velocity cross the magnetic field. So basically the drift or external force can be both electric field or magnetic field into dou F by dou K. We can derive this should be equal to F minus F naught by tau, and we can solve this. If we reach steady state, we take that this does not change with time, so one can solve for F given F naught, right? So we saw that F will turn out to be F naught R minus some function of the electric field, right? I don't remember that function exactly, minus E by M star, something of that sort, right? So basically it means that at steady state the Fermi-Dirac distribution at any due to the external field will be offset by the applied electric field, right? With this given, the scattering term dou F by dou T can be written, or we started to see more closely or little deeper into the relaxation time approximation. Can we calculate tau? We started to answer that question. So we started to write dou F by dou T as some scattering probability whose let's say if the probability to be scattered from K to K prime. So basically what we did was, let's say we took an electron wave with momentum K, and let's say this is some scatter, and it gets scattered as k prime, right? And it's possible that this k prime can be let's say all around a sphere, right, for the same k prime value. So we saw that this is integral over all dk primes by 2 pi cube. Why 2 pi cube? Because dk is not continuous, it is discrete, right? And this was written as f of k prime, that is the Fermi-Dirac distribution, probability of this one to be occupied, k prime to be occupied, 1 minus f of k, probability that k is empty, scattering from k prime to k, minus f of k, that is probability that k is occupied, 1 minus f of k prime, that is k prime is empty, into w of k comma k prime. So what it means is, here we are talking about an electron with k getting scattered to k, from k it goes to k prime. The first term is an electron with k prime coming to k, right? So this gives you the net occupation probability of k, right? So this is something that we tried to solve. We took one particular example how to solve this. We took one example, and that example was charged impurity. We saw that you take a material, and in that material, let's say I introduce a charged Ze, Z being the valence of the atom, E being the electronic charge. So this is some positive quantity. Let's say this is to do with a dopant or something of the sort, right? And the potential is given by potential that an electron faces due to this positive charge is given by Ze square minus Ze square by 4 pi epsilon into r, right? It has to decay as a function of r. This is what is called as bare potential. Why it is called bare is that there are no other floating charges. I have introduced one positive charge, and what an isolated electron will face depends inversely on the distance r and directly on the charge Z, right? So this is standard electrostatics. However, we saw the issue of screening. What is screening? Is if you have some free electrons, if your material happens to have some free electrons, then the total charge is not just the introduced charge, that is charge external, this is basically Ze, right, plus some induced charge. This positive charge will attract some cloud around it, right? So basically this will reduce the net charge field that this electron which is far away will see, right? So this is what this entire screening principle is. If I introduce a positive charge density in a material, it will attract some negative charges around it, screening such that the net charge that an isolated electron will see far away is not the charge that you introduced, but something which was screened. And we saw that the potential of an electron now the electron cannot be any electron, right? Because the screening depends upon the wave vector of the electron. So the potential that an electron with a wave vector k will face is actually written as Z into E, that is the charge which is present, divided by epsilon k square plus lambda square. Epsilon is the dielectric constant, is called the infinite dielectric constant, right? This is independent of the k vector. And lambda square, which is the screening constant, is written as E square dou n by dou mu. This dou n by dou mu is a very important parameter. What it tells is, let's take some electron distribution in a material, okay? So let's say I have some density of states like this, and I have electrons till this point, and let's say this is mu. So this is what it eventually means, right? So all the electrons below the Fermi level, let's say we're talking about at 0 Kelvin, all the electrons below the Fermi level, mu is the Fermi level, below the Fermi level is filled. The question is, how much will the electron change if the Fermi level moved from here to some small value del mu, right? So it depends upon this area, and this area depends upon the density of states, right? And if it's a metal, it's easy to see that this density of stress will be extremely large, and the metals will screen now more efficiently, right? For metals, lambda square is a large value, whereas for a semiconductor, it can so happen that this mu, that is the current mu position, can lie in a gap, right? Let's say for a semiconductor, let's say you have a conduction band, you have a valence band. Let's say the Fermi level is here. Now, how much will the electron density change if the Fermi level moves from this point to this point at 0 Kelvin? Obviously nothing, right? So basically a semiconductor at 0 Kelvin just will not screen. But a semiconductor at some other temperature where the Fermi function is something like this will have a small screening depending upon the electron density here. Now as the mu moves from two different places, it's easy to see that the electron density will change somewhat at non-zero temperatures, right? So that's what the screening constant is. That's why at higher temperatures you will have better screening than at lower temperatures. One has to keep this in mind. So now that this is the potential that an electron will face, of course this potential is in Fourier space. Now this potential in the real space can be inversely calculated from here, which will turn out to be this bare potential minus sigma z e square by 4 pi epsilon r into e power minus lambda r. So the higher screening, the faster it will die. So we saw these plots and so on, right? So now that we have calculated the potential, how do we calculate the scattering rate? To calculate the scattering rate, one has to envision, let's say we have a DC forcing term, right? And because it is DC, we are talking about steady state, and we will talk about homogeneous distribution. So the Boltzmann transport equation will turn out to be dou f by dou t, which will turn out to be 0 minus E f dot del p dot f. Sorry, let me keep it E. Del p dot f is dou f by dou t, which is scattering, which can be written as f of k prime minus f of k into w k prime k into dk prime by 2 pi cube. This is the scattering term, right? And this is all of k's, integral over all the k's, correct? Now what is wkk prime? This k prime, this is the scattering probability. This is what is typically obtained from the Fermi's golden rule, right? So I did not do this in detail. I will wait for you to ask me if you really need me to do this, but I will just write the expression here, which for the case of the isolated charge, which is 2 pi by h cross, this is k prime, this is psi of r into k, right? This multiplied by delta of ek minus ek prime. Now we are talking about elastic scattering. So basically this is delta of ek minus ek prime. If it is inelastic scattering, we will get an additional term, right? But for this, if we substitute the equation above, what we get is 2 pi by h cross z e square, basically this is square, sorry, by v epsilon square into 1 by 4k square sine square theta by 2 plus lambda square into delta ek minus ek prime. Now if I substitute this wk into this equation, it's easy to see that you once again equate this to f minus f naught by tau. This is the actual definition of the scattering term. So this f minus f naught by tau will turn out to be integral over all k space f of k prime minus f of k into w of k prime dk prime by 2 pi cube. If I solve this, then I get 1 by tau, and this is something that we discussed previously in our previous lectures. But what is one thing that I wanted to tell you is this k prime depends strongly on the angle between the two scattered vectors k and k prime, and we saw that if lambda is really large, then you have a k independent scattering term. If the lambda is small, if the screening is small, then you have maximum scattering in the line of the transport itself. So let's say this is k. The question is, what angle will k prime take? This is theta. If theta is small, sin theta is obviously small, so you will have the maximum scattering probability if theta is small, if k and k prime are almost collinear, right? If it is large, then this term will be 0, so basically you will have something which has a small scattering probability. Okay, so with this introduction, now let me go to what we were supposed to discuss today, which is phonon scattering. This is just another way of writing this equation, right? So basically this equation remains the same. It is just another way of writing how do we calculate this wkk prime, because this wkk prime is what finally introduces this potential between the various scattering electrons, right? So this, if it is an charged impurity, we get the potential is something like this. Now what we have to do is we have to look at what should be the potential for phonons. First we have to understand what is a phonon. So basically phonons, I suppose you all must have already know about phonons, so I'm going to be brief and fast about phonons. Phonons are quantized lattice vibrations. So once again we are going to be semi-classical about it. What do we mean by semi-classical? Is we are going to talk about fields, we are going to talk about forces, we are going to talk about potentials, all of them classically. But when we talk about how these phonons are being occupied, then we use the Bose-Einstein quantum statistics, right? So that's why we call it semi-classical. So what does this the potential of the phonons or the atoms depend upon? It depends upon the atomic configuration, the lattice structure, depends on crystal structure, its motif, right? How many atoms and what atoms it has, and so on and so forth, right? But the simplest way to look at it is the separation between the atoms. Let's say I have an atom A and the separation between two atom A's, right? And this separation, let's say we call it R, can be plotted. This is the interatomic distance R, right? And there are two kinds of forces which act between these two. One is the positive charges in the atom will attract the negative charges in the second atom, right? So basically there is Coulombic attraction which goes inverse of R, as we saw previously, right? And you have electron repulsion. This atom has an electron cloud, this atom has an electron cloud. There will be an electron interaction, and there as well as there is a proton kind of interaction, right? Both of them being repulsive. So you will have a strong repulsive force. The summation of these two forces will give you a minima. So I am drawing the summation of these two somewhere here. It undergoes a minima and it goes strongly up. So this place where this potential U was as a function of R is the minimum. I'm just plotting it as R naught, right? So this is I don't know if you have previously heard about Lennard-Jones potentials and stuff. So this is what basically it means. There is some distance, equilibrium distance R naught between the two atoms, in which the total potential energy is the minimum. And any function which has this kind of a behavior can obviously be expanded by Taylor series, right? So basically this function U in the vicinity of r naught plus some, let's say, delta r, can be written as u of r naught plus dou u by dou r at r naught into del r plus 1 by 2 dou square u by dou r square at r naught into del r square. Obviously this potential u at r naught is a minima, right? So dou u by dou r is going to go to 0. So only thing which will matter is the second order contribution, plus so on. If del r is going to be small, why we are talking about del r at all is, let's say that you have two atoms at their equilibrium position, and let's say these start to vibrate, right? This atom moves from here to here, and this is del r. So basically, under this situation, the atom is sort of acting like a harmonic potential, right? So basically, if you can see this, del u, change in u due to some change in r, is basically half del square by dou r square. I'm going to call this some capital C into del r square, right? So this is very similar to half m omega square x square. This is the harmonic potential, if you remember, right? So this is the potential if you have two atoms which are vibrating. So eventually a vibrating atom is more or less a harmonic, can be represented as a harmonic oscillation. And when there is an harmonic oscillation, you know how to represent these things. We have seen this in our previous lectures. It will turn out to be this ladder energy states, right? Each one of them differing by h cross omega, the lowest one being the energy En being n plus half h cross omega, right? These are the energy levels in a harmonic potential, and h cross nu depends upon all the factors, m omega and all those things, right? So I'm not going into the solutions of these things, but I'm just going to tell you that phonons or lattice vibrations are basically harmonic oscillations, and the harmonic oscillations act as if each of the energy state adds an finite or a constant value of energy. It's like taking a bag and adding particles into that bag, right? And because we saw previously that because these solutions of these harmonic oscillators are actually bosons, the statistics that they satisfy is not the Fermi-Dirac statistics of fermions, but the Bose-Einstein statistics, right? So I'm just giving you a little heads up in this particular fashion. Now that you know the potential, the force is basically a gradient of this potential. So basically it can be written as dou by dou del r into del u, so which will turn out to be del r into C, because this dou square u by dou r square is written as this. And of course this force is I'm going to write del r as small u just for our convenience, and this force can be written as mu double dot is u into C, right? And this is a very simple differential equation, and you know the solutions of this differential equation. In case this is a differential equation when you have a monoatomic chain of atoms, and under this situation I'm going to leave it as a homework. You can see that the energies or the wave vector, the frequencies depend upon the wave vector k linearly to a certain extent, right? Omega is the h cross omega. It's basically a scaled version of the energy, and k is the wave vector. You know the solutions of these differential equations, you know how to write these differential equations, and they are basically plane wave solutions, right? And you will see that they're almost linear. Sorry, they're actually quadratic. Yeah, they're actually quadratic, right? It just goes like this. Now, now instead of a single atomic lattice, let's say if you have a biatomic chain, this is something that we have previously seen in 614 as well. So instead of a monoatomic chain, you have one atom A and another, let's say, atom B. Then you have another atom A, then you have another atom B. When you have something like this, then you have two sorts of motions here. Okay, so let me just write it down. Write the main force equations, and then when we solve it, let's say this atom has mass m1 and this atom has mass m2. The solutions for displacements in any position S can be actually written as m1 us double dot c vs plus vs minus 1 minus 2 us mt vs double dot c us plus 1 plus us minus 2 vs. This comes from simply the different ways in which these guys will move, right? So basically you have this guy being v s minus 1 and this is us plus 1, right? So let's say this goes like this. So if you solve these two, you get a coupled equation, and you have two solutions for this coupled equation. And when you solve this biatomic molecule, you have two lines, which is called as an acoustic line, and the other one which comes like this, which is called as the optical line, and this is acoustic. It will be instructive for you to actually solve this. This will be a part of your homework. You will solve this and then plot the optical branch and the acoustic branch for some values of mass and c's, right? So it will be easy to see, it will be easy to plot these two functions using MATLAB or something like that, and you will see that both these things are very different dispersion and very different energies or frequencies. It has to do with how they oscillate. The acoustic branches oscillate in phase. So both the atoms A and B oscillate in phase. In sense, what we mean is both A and B move together. Let's say if if A moves in right, B also moves to the right. So it moves together. Or let's say if A moves up, B also moves up. So basically you have a constant phase relation between A and B, and the frequency of this oscillation gives you a low frequency oscillation because you have a large mass oscillating together, right? It has a larger inertia, so to speak. So it has a lower energy. So basically it is called as acoustic vibrations. The second one, which operates at optical frequencies, when you are obtained when you have this A and B oscillating out of phase, which happens when A goes down, B will go up, right? So under such situations, the frequency is higher. It's easy to see that's also because the wavelength is smaller, right? Now in the acoustic case, when all of them are acting in series, now you will see that the total wavelength will be much larger in comparison to this case when A and B are acting opposite. So your wave should be interatomic distances, and interatomic distances gives you real high frequencies. So it is typically obtained at very high frequencies in comparison to the acoustic frequency. So you have two branches, which is called as the optical and acoustic. You will get these two branches if you have a biatomic chain, right? Once again, there are certain important properties. The K space of phonons cannot be continuous. Once again, the K values should so basically you have the von Karman boundary condition, which restricts the smallest K that you can have. So the smallest K value you can have will turn out to be del kx will turn out to be 2 pi by n being the number of unit cells along x-axis. Similarly, you will have the number of unit cells along y, number of unit cells around z. So the smallest k total volume will be similarly to 2 pi cube by the volume in the real space lattice. Okay. Second, the statistics. Is the Bose-Einstein statistics, which means the number of phonons with any energy omega is basically given by 1 by e power h cross omega by kt minus 1. So n giving the number of phonons at with energy omega. So basically these are not fermions, so you can have more than one phonons in particular energy, right? So basically you will have a very different distribution for phonons, which is different from the Maxwell's distribution as well, which is just e power minus h cross omega by kt, right? So now that we have seen the phonon dispersion, so let me, instead of k here, I'm going to use q, which is most commonly used in the phonon literature, right? It has just to mean that it is also a wave vector, but k's are usually used for electrons, and phonons it's usually used, what we use is q, right? And now that we understand the various values, so basically the energy of a phonon with a wave vector q is this one, and so on, right? So now that we know about phonons, their population, which is given by the Bose-Einstein distribution, and their energies, we can calculate the scattering probability, which is omega p to p prime. Remember, phonons are basically inelastic scattering. So basically, if I get an electron with momentum p in some phonon bath, what we mean by phonon bath is you have a lot of phonons with different energy distributions. It gets scattered to p prime. Once again, what we use is going to be the Fermi's golden rule, but instead of now using the elastic case, we are going to describe what is the inelastic case, which is basically given by 2 pi by h cross mpp square delta of EP prime minus EP minus or plus h cross omega. So this h cross omega is the energy of the phonon, right? And basically there can be two situations. The situation when the energy of P is smaller than the energy of P star. The energy of P is smaller than P dash. That means that you have absorbed a phonon, right? So basically, let's say you have something like this. You absorb a phonon, h cross nu. This is P. You give back P dash such that P dash is P plus h cross nu. It's called as a phonon absorption. The exact opposite case, you have an P coming in, P dash going out, but you emit h cross nu. I am drawing Feynman's diagram in not the right way, right? The wiggly lines are typically used for photons, and the electrons are typically drawn by straight lines. So I did not name this as Feynman drawings, but then I am also not talking about propagators here. So bear with me for all these mistakes here. So here P dash is P minus h cross nu. Right? Basically, it has to be EP. Right? Now, this M of P star is basically the overlap integral between the, let's say, psi P prime star into this U, this is the phonon potential, into psi P dr, right? And this phonon can be written, let's say we take psi p dash as the block waves, e power I p or p dash, let's say x. Let's say we are still talking about in one dimension, and we take u to be some e power I qx, right? So basically this is some phonon with q. mp to p prime is basically given by e power minus I p dash x, e power I qx into e power I px dx, which is e power minus I p dash minus p minus q dx, right? And this integral minus infinity to plus infinity is basically delta of p dash minus p minus q, which tells you which will be non-zero. This scattering has this rule only if p dash is p plus q. Again, this does not have to be plus q, can also be minus q. In such situation, p dash will be p minus q, right? So basically this will be the absorption case. This will be the phonon emission case. Right? So you need to satisfy two selection rules. The first one, energy is energy plus or minus h cross omega q, and k prime is k plus or minus q, q being the wave vector of the phonon, right? And once again, once we have calculated this mpp dash, right, the scattering probability, or we know this wpp dash, we have to once again put it into the Boltzmann transport equation, which is dou f by dou t, which is f minus f naught by tau, which is given by f of k prime into f of into 1 minus f of k, w of k prime to k minus f of k, 1 minus f of k prime, w of k comma k prime, dk prime by 2 pi q, right? And we saw that if you know the equilibrium concentration, then you can simplify this. If you know w, k and k prime are the same, which can be shown to be true, then for the case of inelastic scattering also, this equation can be reduced. But eventually what we do is we get from here 1 by tau, which is the mean scattering or relaxation time constant in the case of phonons, right? And eventually the total scattering time can be written by 1 by tau impurity plus 1 by tau some phonons plus 1 by tau defects, and what all that you know will give you a net relaxation time constant tau. And we know that you can use this expression to finally get your conductivity ne square tau by m, where this tau is the effective lifetime. One has to remember that this equation, though it looks very similar to the Drude's equation, the origin of tau cannot be very different, right? Cannot be more different from what Drude has envisioned, right? So here we have calculated the various scattering rates, not by some phenomenological way, but then we have actually calculated what would be the scattering rate from first principles, so to speak. Right. So let's stop here for now regarding the Boltzmann transport equations and scattering via impurities and phonons. The next time we meet, let's talk about scattering via photons, and a little bit about photons, absorption of photon, emission of photons, and Einstein's equations and such. Thank you.